Okay, HMO greetings. We just want to give people a minute or two to log in. If you have any issues with the sound or the images, let me know in the chat. Hold on one second. Gotta delete that. All right. Okay, so I'll put a link in the chat room to show you exactly where we're posting or have the information posted with regard to the books and so forth. So that's for our books and courses. All right. Okay, so your GMO greetings, I say we thank you once again for tuning in. I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Ranahempata Akan Odwirafo of Akwamumain Amaruka Etifimu, which is the Akwamu nation in North America within Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afurait Kaitnit, meaning African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So we want to pick up where we left off on part 1. So this is part 2 of the Torah and Quran, origin of the terms Torah and Quran and so forth in the language and culture of ancient Kamit. Now, just to recap shortly, let's go to our document. And for those who are unaware, so what we have done and what we're doing with this document, we're going through some detailed information. So in our book, ODWIRASEM, and this is the recent book that I've released. And you see on the back, there are 12 books. So it's a 600-page volume, 8.5 by 11, so it's encyclopedia size. I published 31 books to date. I took 12 of the books I've published, put them together in an anthology, all in one volume, 600 pages. It's a large encyclopedia-sized book, full color. The 12 books that we focused on are the ones dealing with Trustorical, meaning true historical information, cosmology, linguistics, spiritual cultivation, ancestral religious ritual, and so forth. And of course, true history, and so forth. They're all together. One of the books is Kuku Tuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, where we get the information from this article series and so forth, talking about the fictional characters, Muhammad, and as well as Buddha and Brahmana and Jesus, Yeshua, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Moses, Aaron, all of these characters are fictional Yahweh as well. So we touch on some of them in this article to prove that the terms TUA, Ra, which is a title of the ritual incantations written down in ancient Kamit, called quote unquote scriptures by some, but the cosmological writings, TUA, Ra, was corrupted into Torah, and the same thing with Qur'an, corrupted into Quran. So let's look at we're going to look at what we touched on in the part 1, and we'll get to, go directly into part 2. So if you recall, in part 1, we were talking about the origin of the term Torah. And of course, this is from the ritual incantation and ritual movement, the Torah, Ra, or the worship of Ra. And we talked about how this sacred movement, which is a ritual provocation, when you see the two arms this way, and that's the form of the Twa pose, and it's Twa Ra, or the worship of Ra. Sometimes they'll say adoration of Ra, but worship is ritual provocation. The kind of provocation it is an invocation, but it's ritual provocation. So we see that throughout Kamit, and the titles of the texts are called the Twa Ra. And we went through that yesterday. Now we're going to get into the Kura portion. So you see the deity of divine wisdom on the male side is Tuhuti in ancient Kamit, the deity with the head of the habui bird, so-called crane or ibis. In the middle, you see here the divinity of the river called Hap. There's a dual divinity, Hap of the south and Hap of the north. We're talking about the Nile River. So the spiritual force animating the river, on the masculine side, his name is Hap, and they're twins, Hap of the south and Hap of the north. So if you go to Kamit and you stand in the river, the energy animating the river on the expansive masculine side is this deity Hap. That's the energy you're feeling. On the feminine side is the female divinity Merit. But since we're talking about him, this is the deity Hap. Hap of the south is called Hap Reset. Reset meaning south. That's the southern branch of the river. The northern branch of the river is Met. Met means north. So Hap Met is Hap of the north. So you have Hap Met here, and you also have Hap Reset, two different deities. The word for water in Kemet is Mu. Just like English is water, in Akan, the Akan language of Ghana and Ivory Coast, the term for water is Msio. The word for water in Yoruba is Omi. The word for water in ancient Kemet is Mu. So Mu, the waters of the northern Nile divinity Hap Met. The waters of Hap Met is Muhatmet. And Muhatmet are the waters of the northern Nile. The spiritual force that animates the waters, Mu, of the northern Nile, Hapmet, is this divinity. His name, Muhatmet, the waters of the northern Nile, was corrupted into Muhammad. And this is where you get the fictional cartoon character Muhammad, and they made him a fictional Arab and placed him in Arabia and so forth. But the entire cosmology of the deity Muhatmet, the spirit of the northern Nile, they took that entire cosmology, changed it into a story, and tried to apply it to a fictional character who never existed, Muhammad. Now, but that's who that is. And then you have the Hap-Ur, the great river of stars in the sky. So Hap is the divine river spirit, and Ur means great. So Hap-Ur means the great heavenly Nile. Just like you have a Nile on earth called Hap, then Hap-Ur is the great Ur Hap, the river of stars in the sky. So this is what we're looking at right here. Now, so we say in our publication, Kuku Tuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, we state that the term Quran comes from Ku-Ra or Akura, and it's a very intricate cosmology. And of course, that is when we say that our book Kuku Tuntum, that is contained within this 600-page volume. Now, so in the Kuku Tuntum, when you're reading our text, we say the Quran is not a holy book. It is not divinely inspired. The Quran is a series of perverted fragments from ancient writings of Kemet. The term Ku or Aku in the language of Kemet has been used for thousands and thousands of years in Kemet to describe illumination, wisdom, divine intelligence. The ancestral spirits are thus called Aku, meaning the illuminated or shining ones, or those who have embraced and exude divine wisdom. The whites and offspring use the title Qura, or divine wisdom of the creator, and corrupted it into Quran. And this is why they call the Quran the book of wisdom. Now, first we want to look at the whites and offspring when they lie about etymology and linguistics and so forth to cover up for the fact that they've stolen these terms. One of the easiest ways to prove that is if you look at the term and the name of the divinity, Amen. Now, in fact, let me pull this up. I wasn't initially going to pull this up, but let's just do it this way. Okay. I'm going to pull up our book for a second just so you can see a quick image. And just so you can see an image of the male and female divinity. Amen. Hold on one second. All right. Okay, so just so you can see, so this is from inside of our ODWIRASEM anthology. I just want you to see this image so you can get a better understanding of what's in the text. So one of the books, of course, we have is Afuraka Afurai Kaid, the origin of the term Africa. And we show that the term Ka has to do with raised land, the first land, the land of the creator and creatress, and so forth. And then when you look at Ra, the creator of the universe, and then of course you have Ra'et, and she is the creatress of the universe. So the creator and creatress, and in the Kukutuntun we show how Ra, his name is also Ra, Ur, and Ur means great, so Ra, Ur, Ra the great, Ur, and Ur Ra means the great one Ra. Ura became Ura and Uda and Ula and Ula and Allah. Later, they corrupted the title of the divinity. And the female divinity, Alat, was the female counterpart to Allah. Of course, they reduced her later in Islam into a title and so forth. But originally there was Allah and Alat, the creator and creatress, which is a corruption of Ura and Urat in ancient Kamit. And when the Arabs invaded, they learned these terms and corrupted into Ula and Ulat, Ra and Irat, and so forth. And then they reduced her to a daughter of the creator and so forth. And then they just corrupted the entire cosmology. We deal with that in the book, in this book as well. But that's not the focus for today. We talk about how Ra becomes Afura when he moves to the underworld. And we show his name spelled Afura. And of course, that's the origin of the term Afuraka, the land Ka of Afura, the creator, and Afurat Kaet, the land Kaet of Afurat, land of the creatress. So when we say Africa, we're talking about the divine land. Now, I want to show you an image of the male and female divinity Amen and Amenet. In fact, we'll go down to our book, the Okra Complex, and we'll get it from there. Okay, so when you go to the temple of Apet Reset, so-called Luxor in Kemet, you can find this image. And this is the image of the male and female divinity Amen and Amenet. Amen is on the right, Amenet is on the left. Amen, the great father, supreme being, Amenet, the great mother, supreme being, they work together as husband and wife to sustain the universe. Sometimes he's called Amen Ra, she's called Amenet, Ra'et, and so forth. But Ra and Ra'et are grandchildren of Amen and Amenet. Of course, they can use their names and so forth because they birthed them ultimately. But it's Amen and Amenet, the great father, great mother, supreme being, who work together as two halves of the divine whole. Now, the earliest religious compositions yet unearthed in the world are the Meru texts, which are the pyramid texts. The term for pyramid is Mer or Merkut and so forth. Plural is Meru. So the Meru or the pyramid texts are the earliest religious compositions anywhere in the world. In the Meru texts, you find Amen and Amenet together. So the oldest religious writings, scriptures, inscriptions, whatever term you want to use, have the great father and great mother together as two halves of the divine whole. That predates any other pseudo-religious writing. Now, so now let's go back. When we get back to the article, and we want to show you exactly, first and foremost, how they lie about the linguistics, so you don't get caught up in pseudo-linguists, not only the whites and their offspring, but some Black individuals who would call themselves African-centered scholars or linguists, who are really not African-centered, but they promote themselves to be that. They're still following the lies of the whites and their offspring and repeating that, and basically repeating the lies in blackface. And if you don't study it yourself, you will assume these people are authorities because they've written articles and books on linguistics and so forth. False information. But if you don't know any better, you will assume that they must know what they're talking about. So, but they're easily disproven, as we're doing right here. Now, let's look at the term men. This is the root of the term, the name Amen and Amenet. In the language of Kamit, men, to remain, to abide, to continue, to be permanent, to be stable, fixed, abiding, established, and so forth. That's the first definition of men. Then you also have Amen, hidden, person, thing, concealed, secret, mysterious. So the root of the name men and Minet is the stable, permanent, and abiding, hidden being. Of course, the supreme being is hidden, but stable, permanent, and abiding. Even if you think about, of course, if you think about the term spirit, it's an invisible force. If you think about magnetism, it's an invisible force. But we can look at two magnets on the table, you push them close to each other, the same polarities facing north and south and south. That invisible force of magnetism will push them back and forth. So it's an invisible force, but it impacts the physical world, right? So Amen, similar to the air, it's an invisible force. You can't see it, but you experience it. And in fact, you're totally dependent on this invisible force that has oxygen and so forth. There's an unseen force that your very life is, every minute of every day, the fact that you can breathe, you're dependent on an unseen force that surrounds the entire planet, which is the air in the atmosphere. So, Amen is the great hidden, men, stable, permanent, and abiding being, men. So, of course, you have Amen, the hidden God, and so forth. Amenet, the great hidden goddess, and so forth. Same thing. Now, when we see that, that's the root. This predates, there was no such language as quote unquote Hebrew when the pyramid texts, the Meru texts, were composed. And even Hebrew itself is not a real language. That just stole the Kanani language of the people of Kanana, the Black people who migrated from northern Africa and migrated into ancient Kanana, which was later called Canaan, which is later called Israel, and so forth. And they carried the same language and culture and so forth, but they stole the Kanani language, later corrupted into Canaanite, and they started calling it Hebrew, which is fraudulent because there were no ancient Hebrews. That's a fictional group. And we talk about that in our book as well and expose them for being a fictional group stolen from the book of the Cow of Heaven. We get into that. But this predates the fictional Hebrew language. Now look at what they have to say etymologically. Amen. They'll say from the late Amen, Latin and so forth. They'll say from Hebrew Amen, truth, used adverbially as an expression of agreement. To be trustworthy, confirm, support. Then you go to Wikipedia and they source these different etymological dictionaries. They'll say the usage of Amen, meaning so be it, as found in the early scriptures of the Bible, is said to be of Hebrew origin. However, the basic triconsonantal root form, which the word was derived, is common to a number of languages, such as Aramaic. In the Semitic branch of the Afro-Asian languages, the word was imported into the Greek of the early church from Judaism. From Greek, Amen entered the other Western languages. According to the Standard Dictionary, etymology, Amen passed from Greek to late Latin and then into English. Rabbinic scholars from medieval France believe the standard Hebrew word for faith, emunah, comes from the root Amen. Although in English transliteration they look different, they are both from the root aleph, which is a so-called Hebrew word, but it's really ancient Kanani. Mem, character, the quote-unquote A, the aleph character, the mem character in the script, and then the nun character in the script. That is the Hebrew word Amen derives from the same ancient trilateral Hebrew root as does the verb aman. Grammarians frequently list Aman under its three consonants, aleph, Mem, and Nun, which are identical to those of Amen. It's the A, and N. Note that the Hebrew letter Aleph represents the glottal stop sound, which functions as a consonant in the morphology of Hebrew. So they'll say it's a triconsonantal root. The A sound, they'll say it's a glottal stop, so it's the A sound, the M sound, and the N sound. And they'll say that's the triconsonantal root. And it says this trilateral root means to be firm, confirmed, reliable, faithful, have faith, believe. But to be firm, we just saw that men means stable, firm, abiding, and so forth. This is where they stole it from. In Arabic, the word is derived from its triliteral common root word amana in Arabic, which has the same meanings as the Hebrew word. Now watch what they have to say about our people. Popular among some theosophists, proponents of the Afrocentric theories of history, and adherents of esoteric Christianity, is the conjecture that Amen is a derivative of the name of the Egyptian god Amun, which is actually spelled and written and pronounced Amen all across Africa today in different languages. Like in Akan, it's Nyame. In Fang, it's Nzame. In Bakongo, it's Nzambe. Amongst the Lotsi people in South Africa, it's Nyambe, but the root is Ambe. We say in Akan, Ame, same divinity. Some adherents of Eastern religions believe that Amen shares the roots with the Hindu Sanskrit word Am. Then they say such external etymologies are not included in standard etymological reference works. The Hebrew word, as noted above, starts with the Aleph, while the Egyptian name begins with a Yod. That's an absolute lie. So they just lied. They had to include the fact that if you Google the name Amen, you're going to run into some African-centered people proving that the word Amen is used in the Bible and so forth, and found in Arabic and so-called Hebrew and so forth, and other Semitic dialects, is actually stolen from the name of the deity Amen and Amenet. So they try to head that off by saying, oh, well, actually, Amen in Hebrew starts with the Aleph, and in Kamit it begins with the Yod. It doesn't begin with a Yod in Kamit. That's a lie. The reed itself, which is the Ah sound, this is the little reed right here. That's the Ah sound. That is not a Yod. That's a lie. So to go further with Amen, so first, foremost, they just lied. We said Amen means stable, permanent, and abiding. That goes over 1,000 years prior to the creation of the so-called Hebrew language. 1,000 years before so-called Hebrew, we were already saying men means stable, permanent, and abiding. Before there was such thing as quote-unquote Semitic languages, we were already saying in our text that Amen and Amenet means stable, permanent, and abiding. So when they say that it means confirm and stable and support and so forth, that's stolen directly from us. Now the Ah, if we want to go further in the cosmology and the ritual practice, the reason why it's Amen, Ah is the most expansive sound you can make. U is more contractive, E is contractive, but Ah is the most expansive sound you can make. So if you're talking about the name of the Supreme Being, Mother and Father, the sound waves that comprise the name of this divinity, of course, the first sound that represents the Supreme Being, the all-pervasive entity, must be the most expansive sound imaginable. The most expansive sound is Ah. The further contractive you become, the more, restriction you put on the sound waves and the energy. Ah is most expansive. U is very contractive. E is less contractive. E is contractive, but Ah is the most expansive. Then you have the M sound. It's dealing with the life force energy when it comes from the lungs. It comes up in the mouth and it begins to circulate. The life force energy is circulating inside. It's no different than the energy inside of a womb. The entity, the child is in the womb and it's gestating. There's energy circulating within the womb before the child is born. The energy is in the womb and it's staying in the womb and it's circulating. When you say the life force energy, the breath comes up from the lungs, it goes through the mouth and it's circulating, and the life force energy within the air is circulating as well. That's why the word womb comes from nh Kamit, hm. Means womb. Hmet means woman, which is related to womb and so forth. But means womb because the life force energy is circulating. So you have the most expansive force imaginable, and then you have the life force energy circulating within the body of this expansive force. So all of creation is circulating within the great expansive entity. And then you have the N sound. If you say N, and if you look here, you see the little wavy water line in the language of Kemet, in the written script, in the Medut and Toro, the hieroglyphs, the up, down symbol here is the N, the sound, the script for the letter N, the N sound. If you cut that off, up, down, and up, and you cut the rest of it off, that's the capital N in English, because all of the letters in English and Latin and Sanskrit and so forth are stolen, and so-called Hebrew are stolen directly from the script of Kemet. So the up, down, up sound, the reason why it's written in that way is the water line, of course. But if you say the life force energy comes up through the trachea, it goes up through the nose, the nasal portion, and the mouth. So whenever you're saying the energy is going up, down, it's going to the nose and coming out the mouth. If you close your mouth, if you say then it becomes an M again. In order for it to become an N, you have to say and the air is coming out the nose and the mouth. It's going up, down, up, down. That's the way the energy is moving. That's the primordial root energy of being. It's energy that's in potential, but it hasn't exploded into fire yet. N is the expansive womb of creation with the primordial energy that's humming like the sound, amen, and so forth. And N is the origin of the name of the deity, Nun, and the wife, Nunet, and Nun and Nanet, they give birth to Ra and Ra'et. So the wave energy of Nun, and in fact, let's check that out real quick, and then we'll switch back over. This is in our book as well, and we go into detail about this in the book, and this is information that Egyptologists can't give you. But when you understand the cosmology associated with the linguistics, then you have a better understanding. So we talked about the male and female divinity, Amen and Amenet. And in our book, we talk about the cosmology of creation. In Kemet, they talk about the 8 primordial divinities. And quickly, you see Amen and Amenet here on the left. So they'll talk about Amen and Amenet, who give birth to these 6, deities, 3 sets of twins. First, you have Amen and Amenet. Then they give birth to Ka and Ka'at, which is the black substance of space, the male and female force in the black substance of space, which the whites and offspring now call dark energy and dark matter. That's the first entity they give birth to. That's this black substance that can take any form and so forth. Then within that black substance, they have KHU and KHUT. They introduce the KHU, KHUT, expansive and contractive force. That's the breathing principle. He means breath in ancient Kemet. It also means fire. It also means eternal and everlasting. So the fire energy of the breath, KHU, KHUT, the male divinity, KHU, the female divinity, KHUT. So you have this black substance, Ka and Ka'at. Then you introduce expansion and contraction within the black substance, KHU and KHUT. And then the black substance begins to vibrate. Then they give birth to Nun and Nunet, the wave energy, and then the black substance becomes fluid and wave energy starts moving through the black substance. And then Nun and Nunet are the mother and father. They give birth to Ra and Ra'et, which is the explosion of fire and light. And to demonstrate that principle, we're talking about how the black substance, there's an explosion, and then eventually you have planets, suns, moons, and stars. This is the spelling of the name of the divinities Nun and Nonet. So if you look at a pot of water, that's a formless substance. You can take any form imaginable, but it's a formless substance. That's like the black substance of space is a formless substance that is Ka and Kaet. If you introduce heat to water, what begins to happen? KHU, Hehut, heat, fire, which is also like breath. It begins to cause the water to begin to vibrate. Then eventually, when it begins to vibrate, you see the birth of waves of water moving back and forth. Now, wave energy was born with, at first it was a still substance. It was just Ka and Kaet, still, expansive and contractive, potential forms, but it's unformed, so it's just still. When you add the Hehu, Hehut, the breathing principle, it begins to vibrate, it's moving, it adds vitality. Then the birth of waves that are carrying energy back and forth within the pot. Then the waves begin to wave so rapidly that they form spheres, which are bubbles. And the spheres rise up in the pot, and then they explode. And the heat that was in the bubble is released as well. When you look at the origin of creation, they talk about Amen and Amenet giving birth to the primordial entity Ka and Kaet, the black substance that can take any form. Then they introduce Hehu and Hehut, expansion and contraction within the black substance. Then is born the wave energy within the black substance, is wave moving back and forth. And then the waves, Nun and Nonet, the male and female force, Nun and Nonet, combine. And then they give birth to spheres that rise up and explode within the black substance. And that's the explosion of fire and light. That explosion of fire and light is Ra and Ra'et. So just like you have waves that generate spheres, which are bubbles, and they rise up and explode, the wave energy of Nun and Nonet give birth to spheres that rise up in the black substance and explode. That's the explosion of fire and light. That is Ra and Ra'et. And that fiery energy begins to spiral through the black substance of creation, carving out black spheres. Those black spheres are penetrated by the energy of Ra and Ra'et, and they become illuminate, and those become the first stars. And of course, stars are black bodies that give off black body radiation in physics and so forth. So, and then from the stars come the planets. But this is the cosmology of Kamit that is mirrored by what people say about, geology and physics and everything else. But we're talking about Nun and Nonet and the cosmology of Kamit are the mother and father of Ra and Ra'et. So this is what we're talking about. Okay. So you needed to know that to see how intricate our cosmology is. So when we talk about Amen and Amenet, we actually know what we're talking about. So when some fools come along and say that Aman in Hebrew is different from Amen and Kemet because one is spelled with an Aleph and Kemet is spelled with a Yod, which of course is not, that's just a lie to gloss over the fact that they stole the term from our ancestral language. And you need to see how they steal these terms. And when Black pseudo-Afrocentric writers or authors or speakers repeat the lie of the whites and their offspring, you see how compromised they actually are and how they don't understand our cosmology and they're repeating false information. So don't just believe someone because they say they're a linguist and they're Afrocentric and they talk as though they know what they're talking about. You can always challenge anything that anybody says. So you have to understand that to see how they lie about the cosmology. And then, of course, Amenet, Amentet, the land of the west, the land of the setting sun. The sun sets in the west and then disappears and becomes hidden. That's why the land of the west is called Amentet, the land where the sun becomes hidden, deceased, sun sets, and all of that. Now, and because when the sun sets in the west and then it disappears, that's the end of the day. That's why Amen means so be it. It comes at the end of the prayers and so forth, finality, completion, all these different things. Now, let's look at the term Quran. They're going to lie again. But Quran, from recitation, literally book reading, recitation from Qur'an to read. When you repeat what the whites and offspring have to say without challenging it or, examining to see if they're lying or not, there's something wrong with it. So, in the text called the Book of the Cow of Heaven and Ancient Kamit, sometimes they call it the destruction of mankind, the creator of the universe, Ra, tells the deity Tahuti to come with him to the mountainous region. Ra then takes on the form of the divine light called Aku. He is thus called Ra Aku. He then makes the deity Tahuti his representative on earth. Tahuti is the deity of divine wisdom, the spokesperson of Ra, the light of the sun, Ra operating through the sun. The sun is called Aten, and Ra is the spirit that animates the sun. It illuminates the moon. Tahuti has the lunar disk on his head. Ra is operating through the sun and so forth. He uses the sun. So the light of the sun illuminates the moon. Ra operating through the sun illuminates the energy of the moon, which Tahuti is also called Ya Tahuti, operating through the moon. Tahuti receives illumination from Ra and also revelation from Ra. As the illuminated wise one, Tahuti can instruct us in divine wisdom or enlightenment. Illumination allows us to see, perceive when in darkness or ignorance. Before we go forward with that, let's look at the Book of the Cow of Heaven itself. You see the term in ancient Kamit, Aku, meaning light, splendor, radiance, brilliance, glorious deeds, splendid. And then as a title, Akut, beings of light, wise, instructed folk, the illuminated ones. And you see the solar disk with the rays coming out. Aku as a title, the light God, the great light, meaning the sun, the illuminated entity. From the Book of the Cow of Heaven, from the tombs of Tutankhamen and the tomb of Seti. This is what the text says. Hold on 1 second. It says, and the majesty of this God, Ra said, call to me the God Tahuti. And one brought the God to him forthwith. And the majesty of this God, Ra said unto Tahuti, let us depart to a distance from heaven, from my place, because I would make light and the God of light, Aku, in the Duat, the spirit realm, and in the land of caves. So they go to the Duat region where the mountains are and so forth. Then it says, you shall write down the things which are in it. It's telling Tahuti, you're going to write these things down. Of course, Tahuti is the divine scribe. And you shall punish those who are in it, that is to say, the workers who have worked iniquity or rebellion. Through you, I will keep away from the servants from whom this heart of mine loathes. You shall be in my place, Aseti, Asti, and you shall therefore be called O Tahuti, the Asti of Ra, the one who sits in the place of Ra, the creator on earth. Moreover, I give you the power to send forth. Thereupon shall come into being the Habui bird, so-called ibis, bird of Tahuti. I moreover give you the power to lift up your hand before the two companies of the deities who are greater than you, and what you do shall be fairer than the work of the deity whose name is Ken. Therefore shall the divine bird, Tekni of Tahuti, come into being. And then Ra, so he's giving Tahuti these powers. Then he says, moreover, I give you power to embrace the two heavens with your beauties and with your rays of light. Therefore shall come into being the moon god, Ya, of Tahuti. That's why Tahuti will wear the lunar disk on his head. And he's called Ya Tahuti. Moreover, I give you the power to drive back the Hanebu. Therefore shall come into being the dog-headed ape, who's called Anan, the sacred little baboon and so forth, of Tahuti. and he shall act as governor for me. Moreover, you are now in my place in the sight of all those who see you and who present offerings to you, and every being shall ascribe praise unto you, O you who are God. Now, he asked Tahuti to come up with him into the mountainous region. Ra takes the form of the divine light. He tells Tahuti to write down what's in the spirit realm as the sacred scribe. Then he gives him these powers, and he says, the people are going to come and give offerings to you, and you are going to be in my place on earth. And then he gives him an assistant, the little baboon, baboon called Ana. And then it says, whosoever shall recite the words of this composition over himself shall anoint himself with olive oil and thick unguent, and he shall have the propitiatory offerings on both his hands of incense, and behind his 2 ears shall be pure natron, and sweet-smelling salve shall be on his lips. They're talking about the ritual that the person should be engaged in when they recite these words from the sacred text. He shall be arrayed in a new double tunic, and his body shall be purified with the water of the Nile flood. So they're taking water from the river, using it ritually to purify themselves. They're wearing white and so forth. And he shall have upon his feet a pair of sandals made of white leather, and the figure of the goddess Ma'at shall be drawn upon his tongue with a green-colored ochre. Whensoever Tahuti shall wish to recite this composition on behalf of Ra, we're talking about recitation of the divinity Tahuti to Aku Ra. He must perform a 7-fold purification for 3 days, and priests and ordinary men shall do likewise. Whosoever shall recite the above words shall perform the ceremonies which are to be performed when the book is being read or recited. And he shall make his place of standing in a circle or at an angle which is beyond him, and his 2 eyes shall be fixed upon himself. All his members shall be composed, and his steps shall not carry him away from the place. So they're talking about him standing, engaged in meditation, fixing his eyes upon himself, should not be moving at that point. Whosoever among men shall recite these words shall be like Ra on the day of his birth. They're talking about ritual recitation, ritual incantation, ritual chant, reciting, and then you'll be like Ra on his day of birth. And his possessions shall not become fewer, and his house shall never fall into decay, but shall endure for 1,000,000 eternities. So you have the sacred text, then they give you a whole ritual to practice. Put on white, put on the sandals, put the natron and so forth behind your ear, have the incense, move in a specific angle, keep your eyes focused on yourself when you engage in ritual susu meditation, recite, engage in this ritual recitation, and then you'll align yourself with the divinity Ra, and you'll have that energy flowing through you and everything else. Whosoever saith these words work his own protection by means of the words of power. I am the God Hekau, which is the divine word of power, and I am pure in my mouth and in my belly. I am Ra, from whom the gods proceeded. I am Ra Aku. And this is spelled Ra and Aku. So he is called Aku, the illuminated one, the shining one, the one illuminating with wisdom and so forth. This is Aku, Ra as the divinity Aku. Tahuti recites this composition on behalf of Ra, as the text states above. Now, in the Islamic myth, Jibril comes to Muhammad and recites the Quran. Remember, Tahuti is the mouthpiece of Ra. He's the spokesperson of Ra. Throughout Kamit, for thousands of years, he's the mouthpiece, and so forth. Jibril, the angel, recites the Quran. The revelation of the wisdom Ku of Allah Ra, as the text states above, his body shall be purified with the water of the Nile flood, a reference to Muhammad, the waters of the northern Nile, Muhammad. We talked about that earlier. Receiving the purification revelation in connection with the divine wisdom recitations of Akura, Tahuti is instructed to write down what is in the spirit realm. This is the writing down of the Qura, quote unquote, Quran after the revelation. Quran, literally meaning the recitation. Muslims believe to be a revelation from God and so forth. It is widely regarded as the finest piece of literature in the Arabic language and all of that. But the recitation is also called the wisdom. They say Muslims believe the Quran was verbally revealed by God to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel or Jibril, gradually over a period of approximately 23 years, beginning on December 22nd, 609 CE. Of course, December 22nd is the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year and so forth. They knew that after the winter solstice, the sun's light illumination began to increase 1 or more minutes per day. The birth of the sun, so you have the winter solstice, December 21st, and then after that, the sun is born. That's why they say Jesus was born on December 25th. After the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and the sun's energy and light begins to increase about a minute a day until you get to March, where there's 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of darkness. On December 21st, it's only 9 hours of sunlight and 15 hours of darkness. It's the shortest day of the year, darkest time of the year. Then God's son is born on December 25th, and the light begins to increase. The son of the God begins to grow after December 25th. But the illumination comes after the solstice. The solstice is December 21st, and then the light begins to increase after, which is December 22nd. So the Muslims look at the day after the solstice, the light of the sun, the light of Ra, Ra, begins to expand beginning on December 22nd. And the light illumination begins to expand. So that's where they stole it from. Now let's look a little bit further. So of course, the illumination is Aku. Let's look at this, go further with regard to Tahuti to see who we're looking at. So we're going to go back to our book. We talked about Tahuti is the operating through the moon. So let's look at that. So of course, when Tahuti goes up on the mountain and talks to Ra, brings him on the mountain, Ra becomes Aku. He's Aku, Ra, the illuminate one, the divine light and so forth. So when Tahuti is called Ma'a Sher, or true of voice, true of word, and so forth, he goes up on the mountain. The God takes the form of divine light. This is the story of the Moses character going up on the mountain. God takes the form of a divine light, burning bush. He tells him what he's going to, to be the divine scribe and so forth, and write down the laws of the nation and so forth. And Tahuti becomes the lawgiver and comes back down from the mountain, and people follow him. That entire story that's found in the Book of the Cow of Heaven is what they corrupted into the Moses story in Judaism, and it's carried on in Christianity, and it's also repeated in Islam. But then they take the same story, rewrite it once again. The angel Gabriel or Jibril brings the illumination to Muhammad. So let's look at this distinct imagery to prove where they stole it from. Now we'll show you some images, and in our book, Kuku Tuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, we have these images. So when you get the book, you'll get all of this in detail, the cosmology in detail. Okay. So here you see Tahuti, the divinity of divine wisdom. And in the text, it said he's going to give the dog-headed ape or baboon as his assistant, Anan, as you can see here. So this is Tahuti and Anan. And let's go up a little bit. Tahuti has the title Ma'a Sher, meaning true, Ma'al, of word or voice. He's the mouthpiece of Ra, the creator, the spokesperson. This is the term Ma'al Sher, also Ma'al Heru, true of voice or word. Ma'al Sher was corrupted into Ma'al She. Ma-She became Moshe, Moshe, Moses, and so forth. This is the image of Tahuti from the temple of Seti. I took this image when I was in the temple of Seti in Abju, so-called Abydos. This is Tahuti or Moshe holding the staff, the two staffs, encircled by the two serpents, Wachet and Nekabet. So when they talk about Moshe or Moses as the two staffs, and he throws his rods on the floor before the Pharaoh, as you can see right here, and they're swallowed by serpents and so forth, and he swallowed the other staffs or rods are swallowed by the serpent. This is Moshe, Mosher, Mosher, Malker, the one who was true of word, with the rods encircled or swallowed by serpents before the Per'ah, or quote unquote Pharaoh, but this is in the proper context. To go further, this is Tahuti as Moshe and his divine assistant, the little baboon. This is the actual image here. That little baboon is called Anan, Anan. So you have Moshe or Moshe and Anan, which became Moshe and Aran, or Moses and Aran or Aaron. And they become the ones who lead the people to the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace, which is the ancestral realm, but in the corruption, Moses and Aaron are supposed to lead the people to the promised land and so forth. But that's where they stole it from. Now you have Tahuti. We talked about the moon divinity Yah. You see Tahuti here with this lunar disk on his head. He's called Yah Tahuti because he operates through the moon. This is the deity Yah, the spiritual force on the masculine side that animates the moon. And then you have the feminine force, Ya'et, who's the feminine force that animates the moon. When Tahuti and Yah work together, operating through the lunar orb, just like if you and somebody else got in the same car and you're driving, and then this elder gets in the car with you, sits next to you, and says, "This is where you need to go." You are two individuals possessing or operating within the same vehicle. And the direction that the vehicle is going is based on you driving and the elder directing you to the proper place to go. When Tahuti and the deity Yah are possessing the moon, the lunar orb, the orb itself, the energy of the orb itself is Yah on the masculine side, and Tahuti is in the orb directing that force of energy being sent out. So he's called Yah Tahuti, and he has the moon on his head. And when you look in the Coptic dialect, you'll see variations of the spelling, Yah, Yahweh, Yah, Yah, and so forth. And you'll see the spelling here with the little chick, which is the U sound and so forth. So the read is the Iya, Iya. And then you have the forearm with the open palm, which is the aw sound, and the twisted flat, which is the H sound. And then you have the little chick, the little bird, which is the oo sound, woo sound. And then here's the little crescent moon. So that's Yahweh or Yahweh. And this is where you get Yahweh from and so forth. That's where they stole it from. So here you have Tahuti right there. And then we also, as we said yesterday, Tahuti can also be spelled Jehuti. We talked about that yesterday. So here's the key. When we go back to the Quran text, and the reason why we showed the image in the beginning This is Tahuti. He goes up on the mountain to talk to Ra. He has the lunar disk on his head. That means he's the spiritual force operating through the moon. Of course, the reason why the moon is illuminated at night is because it's receiving energy from the sun. The sun is quote unquote hidden at that point, but it's receiving energy from the sun, and therefore the moon is able to be, lit up, and it can guide you through the darkness. So if you're in the darkness at nighttime, you can't see anything in front of you and so forth, and then the clouds disperse and the light of the full moon is shining, then it can light your path in the darkness. It illuminates your path in the darkness so you can make the right steps. You don't run into anything. You can avoid, poisonous animals and so forth. You're guided through the darkness. It illuminates your path. It gives you illumination, or quote unquote wisdom in the darkness. If you can't see the right path in the darkness of ignorance, then the illumination gives you that direction. Ra, operating through the sun, illuminates Tahuti when they connect and directs Tahuti, you're going to represent me on earth when I'm gone. The sun departs, the moon is on earth, it illuminates the people in darkness and so forth, it becomes the leader. So you have Tahuti being illuminated by Ra, this is what happens. And then Tahuti, the one who is illuminated, goes before the Nile deity Mu-Hap-Met. The waters Mu of Hap-Met, the northern Nile. And here on the right, we have the heavenly Nile called Hap-Ur. And then the moon right next to the heavenly Nile, Hap-Ur. But you also have the light on the river and so forth, illuminating the spiritual force Mu-Hap-Met. So you have Tahuti illuminating Mu-Hap-Met. This is where you have Jibril, the spokesperson or messenger of quote unquote Allah, coming to bring or recite or illuminate the spiritual Muhammad, which is the deity of the river and so forth, but Muhammad, the fictional cartoon character. So when they talk about Jibril, a spiritual force and entity coming to recite recitation, these sacred inscriptions or incantations to Muhammad, this is where they stole it from. This image right here is quote unquote Jibril or Tahuti, the messenger of the creator and so forth, illuminating Muhammad. And that illumination comes through ritual speech, recitation. Let me give you one more text to prove that. In fact, let me get this. There's a text that in fact, let me see if I can pull it up in a different way. Okay. And then we can take some questions and answers, but this is you need to see the cosmology and understand exactly where it's coming from. This is very intricate. So this is one of the articles we put forward. Oheme Ucheme, spokesperson of the sacred. So we were showing that in the Akan tradition, the spokesperson Ocheame is the same as Ocheme in ancient Kamit, has the same position and the same name as the spokesperson of the sovereign, the king, as the title of Tahuti. So in Akan, you have the Oheni, the king, and you have his spokesperson, the Ocheme with the staff, the Mpoma, and he speaks for the Oheni, the king. The king is sacred. People don't speak directly to the Oheni, the king. They speak to the Ocheame, and then Ocheame whispers in the ear of the king, and then the Ohini the king whispers back to the ear of the Ochame, and then he speaks what the king says. Now, that is taken directly, so you'll see that the term Ocheame means speaker, reporter, interpreter in the Akan language, called a linguist and so forth. When you look in the language of ancient Kemet, Ochem, to repeat, to narrate, to recount, to tell a story, to tell a dream. A teller, registry, herald, lay priest, recorder, orator, proclaimer, and so forth. The king's herald or messenger and so forth. Ochemu, and then you have Ocheme, the great recorder, and all of that. So Ocheame in Akan, the repeater, the narrator, the spokesperson, is also Ocheme in ancient Kemet. And this is Tehuti's role. He's the mouthpiece or spokesperson for, and then we show Aku and everything else. But it's important to see that the exact same structure, cosmological structure, exists in Akan, that exists in ancient Kemet, because we're the same people and simply migrated to the western part of the continent. But the role of the Ocheame as the mouthpiece, the one that repeats or recites what the sovereign, who's represented and symbolized as a divinity, says. And of course, the sovereign, the great one, hidden and so forth. And then the mouthpiece is the Ocheame, that derives directly from this function of Tehuti as Ocheme, the king's herald, the king's messenger, the great A or Ea, Ochem, the great recorder, the great spokesperson, and so forth. That's what we're doing here. So when they say narrator, repeater, speaker, teller, when they say Jibril recited or spoke the divine illumination to Muhammad or Muhammad and so forth, this is the narrator, the speaker, the orator, the teller, the mouthpiece of Ra, speaking the divine wisdom or transmitting the divine wisdom. Tehuti, as the moon, receives the light from Ra. And then he transmits the light of Ra as the moon to the spirit of Muhammad, the spirit animating the northern Nile, the river, as well as the heavenly Nile. In the same fashion, Jibril, quote unquote, the messenger or spokesperson of fictional character Allah, receives the wisdom and then transmits it to Muhammad. What is that transmission? That's the Aku Ra, or the wisdom of Ra. So that entire cosmology is told in these images. Now, so if you look on the link right there, and of course, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room right now. That's the information I want to share with you all. If you look in the link here, so our, as we mentioned earlier, for those who came late, our 600-page book, ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology, it's 8.5 by 11. You look on the back here, the 12 books that are included. So, as I said earlier, I published 31 books, and I took 12 of them to comprise this anthology. It's an encyclopedia-sized 600-page book, all in color. This information we talked about today, about Tehuti and Ra and Muhammad and all of that, all of it is in the Kuku Tuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, that portion of the book, as well as in the Afrika Afrikai, origin of the term Africa, and the Okra complex, the soul of Akan Fo, talking about the nature of the soul, the Ka and Kayet. So all of that information in detail is in our text. So if you like to get that text, since you all are subscribers to our channel, automatic 30% off. But when you go to the link, you have the option of, when you check out now, you can choose Afterpay at checkout. And if you choose Afterpay, you only have to pay $13 today to place your order. And then you pay the other $13 payments, a couple more $13 payments, and you're done. So it's 4 payments of $13, but in order to order the book, you simply go to the site, click Afterpay at checkout, and they'll say you only have to pay $13 if you're domestic within the United States, $13, and you can place your order. And we ship the book out to you, and then you don't have to pay the other $13 until a couple of weeks from now, and then the third payment 2 weeks from that. So 6 weeks from now, you can pay off the other three $13 payments, but to order the book now, only $13 to order the book. But all of this information about Ra, Ra'et, Amen, Amenet, Muhammad, corrupted into Muhammad and so forth, the spirit that animates the Northern Nile, all of that we have in the text. Now, let me show you one other thing just so you can see. When we're talking about source information, we talked about the Book of the Cow of Heaven and so forth. Let me show you this. It's important for us to get the actual source information, not just, reading what other people have to say, but we need to get the sources. So let me pull this up for you. Okay, this is a short video. And this is just a short video that we recorded the last time I was in Kamit. Okay, let me see. You should be able to see this. Hold on. Let me see if I could. I don't know if it's showing up. Oh, okay, there it is. So you should be able to see that. But what it is it's kind of going in and out right now. But what it is when I was in the tomb of Seti, and you can actually see the imagery. Hold on. Maybe we can try it this way because it's only showing little flashes of it. If not, you know what? I'll give you the link to it. We'll put the link to it in the description for the video, and that way you can see it. But it's just showing when I was in the tomb of Seti. When we talk about the source material for what we're talking about here, the Book of the Cow of Heaven, if you go into the tomb of Seti, as well as Tutankhamen, but for now, the tomb of Seti, because part of the tomb of Tutankhamen was blocked off for renovation and so forth. They may not be finished renovating it, but in the tomb of Seti, we actually have the footage of the actual Book of the Cow of Heaven on the wall with the great, cow divinity, Newt, and so forth. And you see the actual text that we were just reading from. So you can have the primary source material. You don't have to believe what other people are saying. You can go to the tomb of Seti in the Valley of the Kings, and you can get that footage yourself. You can get the text, and then you can compare with what other people have said online, but you can go through it and you can get the information yourself. Now, let me pull up one more thing. And again, if you have any questions in the chat room, you can post them. But this is our page. Now, we have courses on how to read and write the Medut and Toro, the hieroglyphs. So, for example, this one right here, Medut and Toro, learning how to read and write the language and script of ancient Kemet. We did 2 6-week courses, part 1 and part 2. We went through the 271-page book, Let the Ancestors Speak, which is the grammar and language of Kemet. And it took us 12 weeks to go through that entire book to, go through learning the language and the script and so forth. So we did parts 1 and part 2. And when you look here, you can actually get the archived version. If you get the part 1, it's a 6-week course. You also have access to the 271-page book on the grammar and language of Kamit, the Medut and Torah, the hieroglyphs, and so forth. That course is $15, but if you get parts 1 and part 2 together as a bundle, you can get it for $20 for the entire course. And as you can see here, if you choose Afterpay, 1 second. If you choose Afterpay, you can break up that $20 payment into 4 payments of $5 each. So if you go to our link here, you'll see the different options. So you can learn how to read and write the Medut and Torah, the hieroglyphs. And with us, not only do we go through the book, the grammar and everything else, but in addition to that, the books that we have published, and we can show you, for example, the Akan dictionary of the Akan people of Ghana and Ivory Coast, side by side with the hieroglyphic dictionary. And we show the same words with the same meanings, the same deities, with the same names, operating through the same aspects of creation in the Akan language and culture today that you find in ancient Kamit and Kemet. And when people were compiling this dictionary in the 1840s and going into the forest and sitting with Akan people, and they're telling them the words and what they mean, and then you take a book that was written in the 1840s with Akan people in the forest, and you compare it to the ancient language of Kemet that's thousands of years old, and you have the exact same words with the same meanings, it proves that we're the same people and the same deities with the same functions and the same relationships, same people. So we can show that in addition to what a regular Egyptologist will teach you about. This word means coat, and this word means, cat, and this word means, table, and this word means tree. We can show that as well, but we can also show how the language is a living language and it's unbroken, even into the terms that we use in North America, like in the Hoodoo tradition and so forth, the mojo and kanche and all these different things. We can show that as well. So that's one aspect of it, but when you go to the book page on the website, you'll see this part right here. You'll see that you can break up the payment. Here it says break up the payment in 4 payments of $11. But once you put in your address and it's domestic, then, for the shipping, it adds 2 more. So it's actually going to be $13. And you can pay $13 a day and order the book now. So you can go to the link now and order the book. Also, on Sundays, we started this past Sunday, and we're going all the way through March 22nd. Every Sunday through March 22nd. I want to show you this as well. We are hosting our weekly session on the Pert Im Heru, the book of coming forth by day, which is misnomer, the Egyptian book of the dead. So we're going through these cosmological ancestral writings from which fragments of them were stolen, corrupted, and then this is where you get the Bible and the Koran and the Talmud and so forth. They stole the quote-unquote scriptures, the sacred writings of our people that derive from the pyramid texts, the oldest religious texts in existence. In the papyrus of Ani, they took these texts and put them in papyri. So when people transition, they wrote these sacred texts and put them in the tomb with them. This is why the whites and offspring called them the Book of the Dead and so forth, because they were found in the tombs. But they can't contain the ritual prayers and incantations and cosmology of ancient Kemet and so forth. And these writings were corrupted, fragmentary corruptions, and changed into these fraudulent writings of the Bible, Quran, Talmud, and so forth. But we have the original. So we go through these different texts and talk about the cosmology and the language and everything else and what they're saying and how they relate to us and our spiritual cultivation today. So we're going through the entire Book of Coming Forth by Day, Pert Im Heru, misnomer Book of the Dead. We started on Sunday. So every Sunday at 11 a.m., you can go register for that. It's open to Afro-Akani people, African Black people only. You can register. We'll send you the link. We'll send you the archived recording of this past Sunday's first session. It was about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. We go through the text line by line, show what they're talking about and who these deities are, what their function in creation is, how they're related to your physical body and our community and spiritual cultivation. And we go through translating the text point by point. So once again, when you look at this link here, the Odwirafo Square link, you can access that. Let me show you that as well. You can access that now. It is donation based. We don't have a set price for that. Hold on a second. Let's bring that up again. All right. Hold on, let me see. It's not pulling up. Let me pull it up in a different way. Okay. Okay, so when you go to the same page, the link that's on the channel right now, this is the per Imheru. And the description is there, all the information is there. It's donation based, so you can donate whatever you want to, but we describe all of that, but we go through point by point, we're going through the text of ancient Kamit. These texts were written thousands of years ago by our people. They are in Samanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors wanted us to understand the cosmology, how to apply these things to everyday life, our spiritual cultivation. When we talk about ritual song, ritual dance, ritual chant, ritual susu, which is meditation, ritual dance is asal, ritual movement and so forth, abonkwa, all these different things that we use to attune our spirit body, just like you get up and work out to attune every part of your physical body. Well, we have ritual practices that we attune our spirit body so we can be in alignment with divine order. So every thought, every intention, every action, every moment of every day is in alignment with divine order. So when we execute our function in the world, we do so in a harmonious way. And if we run into some kind of roadblock, we engage the ritual process to realign ourselves with order so we can continue to function harmoniously in the world and execute our function in our community in a balanced fashion. So these texts are not just Trustorical, something to be like, ooh, or, it's something intriguing and so forth. These are manuals for spiritual cultivation that our people laid out because they knew at some point, somewhere, some of us would forget some of this information for one reason or another. So they were here for thousands of years so we can reach back and grab these texts. And then when we look at them and examine them, and then look at the cultures and languages of various parts of Africa, and our traditions in North America, like the Hoodoo tradition, Juju, Voodoo, Wanga, Ngangai, Gola and Kisi, which is Gullah and Geechee and so forth. We have the exact same cosmological structure, the same ritual practices and so forth, the same forms of spiritual cultivation. So it confirms from thousands of years ago what our people have preserved in our blood circles today, whether it's dealing with root work, ancestral medicine and so forth, or ritual practice. So we get detailed insight into how to conduct ourselves spiritually, cultivate ourselves spiritually, and so forth. So for other individuals, this may just be something that's intriguing to learn that we built monuments in ancient Kemet. For us, this is our actual ancestrally inherited culture. And we should know our actual texts, our written sacred texts, just like other individuals read and memorize these fraudulent texts like the Koran and the Bible and the Talmud and the Dhammapadas and the Bhagavad Gita and so forth, these fraudulent texts that are stolen from fragments of our text from ancient Kemet, just like they memorize the fraud, we need to memorize the true, real, authentic text and engage the ritual practices to cultivate ourselves. So that's why our people, our Nsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors, laid these texts out for us and preserved them for thousands of years for us to come back and access them, which we have done. Now, they didn't know, 4,000 years ago that we would be able to get in a vessel, a plane, and fly across the world and take a cell phone and, record these texts and then bring them back home and study them. But they knew at some point we would make our way back to our ancient ancestral land, our heritage, get this information and incorporate it in our lives. So they left it there for us specifically. All right. Okay, so if there's no questions in the chat room, I want to make sure. Okay, so again, yet I'll say we thank you for tuning in. And once again, if you go now, for those of you who are subscribers, you can subscribe to our channel. And you can share the information as well, but if you're a subscriber, then you can get the automatic 30% discount from our book, and you can order it for $13. Now, if you go on Amazon, the regular Amazon site, our book is on Amazon. The difference with Amazon is, as people know, they take 60% off of the sell price from booksellers. So any book that you put forward, if you had a book, as we say, for $10 that you were selling, and you said, I'm going to put it on Amazon so I can sell my book. If it's $10, Amazon is going to take $6. They're going to keep the $6 and they're going to give you $4 every time you sell a book. So the book is a higher price on Amazon, and you'll see that with booksellers. So we also have our book on our own website. And for those who know that, people who watch our videos and stuff like that, people who don't watch what we're doing, they'll just see the book on Amazon and they'll purchase it unless they find us online and so forth. But for those of you who are subscribed, you'll see that it's on Amazon, but we also have it cheaper. It's $59.95 on Amazon. It's $44 plus shipping on our personal website. And then you can also use Afterpay and break that up. And you only have to pay $13 now. And you place the order. So that's why we say subscribe. Yet I say we thank you, everyone who subscribed so far. We're expanding the channel. We appreciate that. So, okay. So yet I say we thank you for joining us. And Yabesha Bio, we will meet again. That's it.